Our next speaker is Yip Kok To. Mr. Yip Kok To grew up in Malaysia as a Taoist Buddhist and was into Zen meditation for 20 years and became a Christian at the age of 38. He currently resides in Singapore. He's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales and is currently chairman of Anon, a residential lifestyle modification center in Malaysia established 25 years ago. He's an international speaker and specializes in teaching the differences between biblical meditation with Eastern meditation, Christian derivatives of Eastern meditation, and their therapeutic derivatives. He's spoken at Dr. Neil Nedley's EQ Summit in February 2016 in the US, Canada, Australia, UK, Germany, the Netherlands, and Asia. He was interviewed by 3ABN Television Australia for a series of 3 sessions for his views on meditation and has featured in a documentary on modern Eastern beliefs and practices on 3ABN Television International. His videos are on YouTube and his messages can be heard on Audioverse. He will be presenting on the topic, Yoga, Eastern Beliefs, the Bible, and the Neuroscience of Meditation.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to be able to speak to you about yoga and the Bible. Well, we're going to focus on yoga, obviously, Eastern beliefs, the Bible, and the neuroscience of meditation. Now, on this screen, you will see the logo of Yoga Faith. And in that logo, which is really about yoga, they have the cross of Calvary in red. So Christianity has made great inroads and continue to make great inroads. Yoga has made, and Hinduism has made great inroads into Christianity. Now, my spiritual journey. I am Chinese. I was born in Malaysia. I grew up as a Taoist or a Buddhist. Well, they're close, okay? But the point I'm trying to make here is this. The East, the spiritual landscape of the East is dominated by Hinduism. Hinduism came first, and then it branched out. Hinduism retained its nature, but there was a branch, and that was Buddhism. And from Buddhism came Japanese Buddhism, which is called Zen meditation, which I did for 20 years, and also Taoism. Okay, so nonetheless, my emphasis is the East is dominated by Hinduism. It came first. Number 2, there is a common denominator of Eastern belief in the East that God is already in every person, waiting to be discovered through yoga, through Zen, and Eastern meditation. Now, I'm going to explain how it all works. Now, here in the middle of this screen is that icon, Om. Om is sacred Sanskrit icon. Now, what it means is God himself and man, every man for that matter, are all one. From birth, from eternity past, and to eternity future. And one is born with this divine, the inner divine. Now, on the screen, you'll see Namaste. Namaste yoga music, Namaste yoga. And the question really is, what is Namaste? Well, it's Hinduism. It's a greeting, Namaste. What it means is, I honor the divine in you. And of course, one reciprocates. I also honor the divine in you. So within even a Hindu greeting is the assertion that there, in every man, irrespective of who he may be, there is the divine. And yoga, Zen, Taoism, meditation, Tai Chi are processes to discover the divine which is already there. All right, so there is on the left Om Yoga, okay, which speaks for itself. It's about discovering the divinity within. Now, this is you would recognize it as the sign of yin yang, and it's a Taoism sign. It's everywhere in the East. And what does it mean? Well, what it means is this: from one, the source, the genesis, the source of all creation, which Christians would say is God, but Taoism says from the source of creation, one came two. And of course, two came four, and four came eight. But nonetheless, from that source of creation, the genesis of creation, God came two. And they are opposing or polar opposites. Now, one may think, oh, it's about hot and cold and big and small. That's fine. But what it really means, and at the deep end, the spiritual meaning is good and evil are from the same source. Okay, heaven and hell is from the same source. Life and death is from the same source. In other words, opposites, spiritual opposites, are one. Right? So, black and white in that icon, they are never separate. They are one and blended so in perfect harmony. So, good and evil are one. That's the basic idea. Now, it took Carl Jung, the noted psychiatrist, to observe and to say this. Now, this icon, yin yang, well, you will associate this with Tai Chi. All right? We kind of imagine and think that Tai Chi is about balance, but it's not. Tai Chi is about a physical, active meditation. Now, we think that meditation is passive all the time. That's how we are primed to think. But here in Tai Chi, yin yang, meditation is active. And it's not about balancing two things which are separate. The master is the one who has succeeded in bringing polar opposites, even spiritual polar opposites, good and evil, life and death, heaven and hell, to bring it together into one supreme ultimate. And what's that one supreme ultimate? It's likened to God. So in that frame before you, Dr. Carl Jung, he made this observation. Man is a microcosm uniting the world of opposites. So at this point, I want to introduce the idea of something called non-dual. Now, things that are obviously dualistic, hot and cold, big and small, heaven and hell, life and death, God and the devil, being opposites, are in yin-yang and Taoist terms have the same source. They are one. One cannot exist without the other. They have to coexist eternally. Okay, so the emphasis here is, well, in Tai Chi, it's active meditation, not just passive. So we mustn't think of meditation as just passive. Okay? Number two is non-dual. All right? It's not separated and it's not balancing things which are far apart. Now, it takes the common man, the artist, to make this observation. The black in yin yang, here is the bad. The white, here's the good. That black dot in the white, here is the bad, that's in the good. And that white dot in the black, here is the good, that's in the bad. And when you put it together, when it comes together as one supreme ultimate, here is life. And so what does it say? it says to us that in the Eastern thought, good and evil are one, non-dual. All right. Now, what's yoga? Yoga is also to put a practice to bring the opposites together. All right. The sun and the moon, light and dark, hot and cold, male and female, right and left, yin and yang. All right. But it also goes as far as the spiritual polar opposites, life and death, God and the devil. Now, we've got to begin to think, is this fundamental belief dangerous to Christians? All right. Now, let's explore this somewhat more. Now, I did Zen for 20 years from 1838. And the high point or the goal of Zen is something called Satori. Okay, now let's see what Satori is. Number one, it's transcendence. Number two, it is to achieve this transcendence as a direct experience of reality in its totality. In other words, the meditator and everything else that's not part of him, the reality is it is one in totality. And what is in the way of the meditator not being able to perceive that reality? Then it goes on. What is in the way is logical analysis and rationality. All right? Logic and rationality suppress the intuition, which should see everything in one as one. That's what Zen is all about. Now, if it says, if we can dissolve these artificial structures, what are they? If we can dissolve and get rid of logic and rationality and reason, then these corrupting intermediaries, rationality, logic, and reason, if we can get rid of this corruption, then a new world unfolds to us. We are no more confused by dualism, no more confused by a dualistically trained mind. Then all things are one. And we experience this oneness, this reality in totality. That's Satori. And that's what Zen wants to do for its meditators. Now, here's the icon of meditation. At one point, early in meditation, you are that drop of water. Right? You are whole, you're separate. But at a certain point, something happens to you. Something happens in your mind. And you lose that sense of oneness, or wholeness, rather, of separateness, and you drop into the ocean, the cosmic ocean, and you are one with everything, and everything is one with you, indivisibly. Now, that moment, in big terms, is described as all is God. In other words, the flowers and the trees, the air, and everyone else in that sudden realization is God. Now, that is energy, right? That is non-personal God. That's energy, like chi. But for the people who believe in a personal God, God the person, this moment is likened to God, the person in all. But basically, it means the same thing. Now, samadhi is the ultimate state for the yogi. Okay, now let's read what it is. All human consciousness is subject to relativity and dual experience. All right, separate, distinct. Samadhi is the state in which experience is whole, infinite, but whole and single. Now again, like Satori, this is that moment, that oneness. It is the eighth and final step on the path of yoga described by Patanjali. Samadhi may be attained through deep, continuous, and correct meditation. In this state, the three aspects of meditation, meditator, the act of meditation, the object of meditation known as God, are finally united, finally discovered and experienced to be united. They were united, but here is discovery through meditation. Just as the wave melts into the sea, so too the human soul becomes one with the Supreme Spirit. Now that's Samadhi. That's the high point. Okay? Very similar to Satori, expressed somewhat differently. Now, we often think that yoga is just stretching. It's physical. But here are two websites about yoga that describe it as poses as devotion in motion. Now let's read the one on the left, the yoga tradition of the Mysore Palace. Yoga is a spiritual body. It's a spiritual body language from India. It is a moving liturgy. It was developed as a spiritual practice to unite with the Hindu divine and as a religious rite to worship the Hindu divine. Many of its poses and sequence of poses are inspired by Hindu mythology. Its active poses are devotion in motion. All right. So you don't need to be praying passively or meditating passively. These are active poses of devotion in motion. Now, this is very similar to Tai Chi, and that picture on the bottom right. Now, I've said to you, the Tai Chi master is the one who has put opposites, what seems to be opposites, into one unity, into one supreme unity. So here, getting back to yoga, it says, many of its poses and sequences of poses are inspired by Hindu mythology. Its active poses are devotion in motion, the embodied veneration of figures from sacred Hindu literature. Its passive poses are physical philosophy. Its passive poses are physical philosophy, the bodily expression of non-dual oneness philosophy. So what they're saying is you cannot differentiate and should not differentiate that meditation is just passive. It is active. Poses are active meditation, just like Tai Chi. Okay. Now, yoga faith puts it even more strongly. Right? It talks about, well, devotion, worship, also in motion. And it has the audacity to put the cross of Calvary into its logo, yoga faith. Now, Samadhi has 8 limbs. Okay? And on the left, Yogapedia explains this. There is the limb that has to do with ethical behavior, spiritual practice, physical poses, breath control, turning our senses away from outside influence, concentration, meditation, and then samadhi, the ultimate state of consciousness and the goal of Hatha Yoga. And now, these are not 8 steps. These are limbs. Now, there's a big difference between steps and limbs. Let me try to explain this. If, for example, there are 8 steps instead of limbs, if we chose only to do posture as a step, I'm choosing step 3, physical poses, then you limit yourself to step 3. You can say, I'm only doing step 3. But these are limbs, and limbs are connected. So take my hand, for example, right? I've got 5 fingers and a palm. That makes my hand. These are limbs. So I've got 5, 6 limbs that make up my hand. Okay, now, how does it differentiate how we think about poses? Let's see it in the next slide, all right? On the left are the 8 limbs, and I have purposely identified as A to H. 8 in number, but I do not want to differentiate them as steps. I did not number them 1 to 8. On the right is that born-again spirituality of the Christian. And I have numbered, correlated the 8 limbs of yoga, of samadhi, to Christian practices as 1 to 8. Now, and I'm going to draw the correlation for you. A, on the left, for samadhi, is ethical behavior. Now, Christian has ethics too. All right, so there's some parallel. B, on the left, spiritual practice. Well, Christians have spiritual practices too. Fasting, retreats, communion. C, on the left, physical poses. Well, Christians also have them. For example, number 3, kneeling, raising of hands in praise, and so forth. D, on the left, breath control. Oh, Christians on the right, 4, has also, a lot of self-control. Temperance, for example, patience. Now, I want to refer to 2 Peter. It says, by divine power, we partake of divine nature. And the overlapping attributes of divine nature, they are not steps, they are overlapping attributes. And you will see out there, I put I think it's called an acronym, FVKTPGKC. Now, these are overlapping, not steps, but limbs, if I may use that word. They are faith, starting with faith, virtue, knowledge, temperance, patience, godliness. K is kindness, and C is charity. Now, you will find that they are overlapping. Right? It is not as if when you have faith at the beginning, you do not have charity. They overlap, they spiral upwards. Right? So they are limbs, not steps. E, on the left, sensing that within, to bring the concentration, the awareness within. Number 5, on the right, the spiritual life, the quiet time, the reflections, the prayer closet. F, on the left, concentration. Christians in the correlated number 6 has memorizing of scripture, knowledge. Yeah. And G, for yoga, meditation. And 7, for the Christian, biblical meditation. And then H, for the yogi, ultimate consciousness. And 8, on the right, for the Christian, that born again, everyday born again person walking in the Spirit. Now, what I'm trying to emphasize here is this. On the right, for Christian, if he were to say, I want to do biblical meditation, but he did not have Bible knowledge, he did not memorize scripture, how could he meditate? How could he do biblical meditation without being able to meditate upon the Word of God if he did not know the Word of God? All right, so what I'm saying is this. To do biblical meditation, you have to have 1 to 6. Okay? You will have Well, Christian ethics, you'd have a person of that respects others, right, who cares about others. You'd be doing fasting and retreats and so forth and so forth. And then biblical meditation consolidates all 1 to 6 for you. All right, now think about it for doing yoga on the left. G is a limb. What it does is it serves to consolidate A to F. And in a modern yoga studio, you would be already doing A to F as limbs. And passive meditation is only there to consolidate your active meditation, A to F. So we can't say, a Christian can't say that he is not doing biblical meditation, step 7, when he's doing 1 to 6. Neither can a yogi say, if he's doing A to F, that he's not in any way meditating, because meditation, if perceived to be only passive, that's true. But meditation is active, as we have already seen. So, for both sides, for the yogi and for the Christian, both are limbs, not steps. Now, the thing I want to emphasize is this. Meditation messes with the brain and the mind. For example, yoga nidra, and you can Google this, reduces cerebral blood flow to the brain. Now, there's a part in the brain that's really precious to everyone, particularly Christians. Let's read what a psychiatrist friend of mine says about a special part of the brain in front called the anterior cingulate cortex. Let's call it ACC for short. A special part of the frontal cortex called the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, is our neurological heart. It is here we experience love, compassion, empathy, sympathy, altruism. And the ACC is also the seat of the will, the place we choose right from wrong. Now, remember this. Few things simple: love, the will, and choosing right from wrong. That's the ACC, and it's in front of the brain. Now, researchers are looking at what happens to people in meditation, Eastern meditation. And what they saw was this. Eastern meditators, compared to controls who did not do meditation, showed reduced activity in the ACC during meditation. And you can see on the graphics on the top left, there you see a line that's 0. And what is below 0, deactivated ACC, is M, meditators. C, which is control, are above 0. Now, can anyone afford for the ACC to be deactivated? Particularly the Christian, love, your will, choosing right from wrong. No. And the more meditation you do, the greater the deactivation, and the longer the deactivation. Now, in addition to that, there's addiction. Meditation causes the secretion from your own brain, endogenous dopamine. Now, dopamine is the stuff of addiction. You get 65% more dopamine. And therefore, we know that meditators meditate, and meditate. Now, Andrew Newberg, he's one of the top researchers on meditation. And what he's saying here, and I won't read everything, he's saying that meditation affects the frontal part of the brain. And when the frontal part of the brain is affected, it shuts down another part of the brain called the parietal network. Now, what's the parietal network? The parietal network is what tells you where you are in three-dimensional space, your position For example, I'm in this room. I know if there's a fire, I am here. My bodily presence is here. I must get out that door over there. But if I lose my sense of body, border of my body, I will lose that sense of position in three-dimensional space. And what happens? That's called the parietal, the orientation area. And then what I feel is I am borderless. I am one with everything that's around me. And that is losing that sense of self and feeling that you are one with everything, the universe. And Andrew Newberg goes on to say this. We think this is the part of what is associated with somebody losing the sense of self. They feel at one with God, at one with their spiritual mantra, whatever it is they are looking at. Now, this is what that meditation icon describes. At one point, you are that, complete whole drop of water. Something then happens in your brain. The parietal goes out, and you feel at one with everything. When that happens, that drop of water drops into the cosmic ocean, and you are one with the universe. Now, in addition, what else happens to the brain and the mind? Columbia University talks about hypnotism. How does hypnotism work? Now, they describe that there are two parts of the brain in the front. There is the ACC, which is responsible for the will. But there is another part called the lateral frontal cortex, LFC, which is the awareness of reality, will and reality. And they are both working constantly to protect you from false suggestion, from lies. Okay? Now, what Columbia University discovered was this. After successful hypnosis, the will and reality, one of them, either one, is decoupled, deactivated. Okay? Then you have already been hypnotized. You received a false suggestion. So, when one goes into Eastern meditation, now what happens? Well, to begin with, there's less blood flow in yoga nidra to the brain. There is deactivation of the frontal lobe, the ACC. The parietal goes down. But when the frontal lobe is deactivated, the parietal goes down. That's one experience. That's one neural phenomena. But when either the will, ACC, is deactivated or LFC, reality, is deactivated, you are already open to hypnotic suggestion. So, when the parietal goes down and the ACC is already down, you are so open to receiving false suggestions or lies. That's where the danger is. So, the scientists say, sometimes meditation results in profound changes in consciousness, leading individuals into trance-type states, states of self-hypnosis or mystical states. And so, getting back to the icon, the meditation icon, you're no more that drop of water. You have merged with everything. And it's such a dramatic neural phenomena, you've got to make sense of it. Now, if you were a Hindu meditating with a guru, he'd say, well, you've arrived. This is nirvana. Right? You're making sense of something now. The suggestion, true or false, is that it is nirvana. If you are with a Buddhist, the leader would say, you have arrived like Buddha. You are liberated. Liberated from polar opposites, from karma, from reincarnation. Now, if you should be meditating now, Eastern style, and there are many, with a Christian leader, a pastor even perhaps, and you reach this stage, the suggestion to you is, you're in the presence of God. Same neural phenomena, many versions, many explanations, many suggestions, which, because your frontal lobe is deactivated, because your will is deactivated, your ACC is deactivated, these suggestions would come straight in with no obstruction. Now, on the left, Dalai Lama, his very loved and famous quote. Now, Dalai Lama obviously is a meditator. He has reached that Buddhahood. He is liberated. He does not need to worry about his karma. He does not need to worry about reincarnation. Now, his quote, what is love? Love is the absence of judgment. What does that mean? There are no borders. There is no right and wrong. There are no polarities, okay? What is right, what's wrong, what is God, what's life, what's death. When there's no life, no death, he's escaped from reincarnation. When there's no good and evil, he's escaped from karma. He's been liberated. So what he said is, in meditation, it's you arrive at a stage of non-judgment. Whatever arises in your mind, it is what it is. There's no right, no wrong. It's bare attention. It's pure awareness. Now, on the right, King David in Psalms 19 is in meditation. He's meditating on the sun. And then he likens the sun as a strong man, as a bridegroom who's come to run a race. So obviously, the setting is a wedding. Then he meditates upon the law, the statutes, precepts. And he said, these are good. It gives warning, and yet it gives reward. And then his heart turns to himself. He says, who can understand his errors? Cleanse thou me from secret faults. Now he's preparing for a wedding. He wants to be pure for the wedding. Now this is a love scene, obviously. So he turns himself to God. And in the last verse, it says, Lord, you're my strength, my Redeemer. May the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you. And at that point, before that point, he opens his heart, makes himself transparent. He says, I can't understand my errors. I may have hidden my faults. My deceitful heart may have hidden my faults, but Lord, you know. Tell me. And then he says, keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall I be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. So he's king. He may think too well of himself, but now he is before God. And he is appealing to God to reveal to himself things that he may have presumed too highly of. Why? He wants to be innocent, to be pure, to be prepared for that wedding. So what you see are two polar opposites, completely opposite outcome of meditation. The East, non-judgmental. It is what it is. On the right, King David becomes a trusting friend of God who wants to be pure and trusts in God that he will be made pure. Those are the two opposing outcomes. Now, why is it that Christendom has opened itself so easily to the East? Well, this quote here comes from a Christian meditator. And it says, every time God forgives me, God is saying that God's own rules do not matter as much as the relationship that God wants to create with us. Rules are gone. The law of God is gone in that quote. And in reality, I know a lot of my Christian friends say the law is no more. It belongs to the Jews. It's Old Testament. It's legalism. It has nothing to do with the new covenant. The law has been de-emphasized. But 1 John 3:4 says this, whosoever committeth sin transgresses also the law. For sin is a transgression of the law. So the law is out. There's a de-emphasis of the law and a de-emphasis of sin, which is moral, which is what is right and wrong. Okay, so there is a weakening of the pillars of Christendom. The law of God, sin versus righteousness are out the door. And a new spirituality is coming in, a sense of an all-inclusive sense, brotherhood, friendship, yeah, a broadening of the consciousness, going green and so forth. That's the new spirituality. Now, what is the origin of all that? The origin, number one, a post-fall divinity. In other words, what I'm trying to say is this. Although there has been the fall in Eden, the fall of Adam and Eve, Eastern religion denies that there is a fall. In other words, even though there may have been a fall, man has still got that inner divinity post-fall, right? And the tree of knowledge of good and evil reflects this point. Number two, where did non-dualism come in? Not two, but one. It's from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, let's read Genesis 4 and 5, 3, 4, and 5, and I will explain why the tree of knowledge is the source of non-dualism. Verse 4, and the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the days ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Now, the setting of this account. God told Adam and Eve, don't eat of that tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Just a simple instruction. So one day, the serpent tempted Eve, come, eat of my tree. And Eve says, no, no, no. I cannot eat of your tree, or I'll die. And the serpent said, no, no, Eve, there is no difference between God's tree and my tree, between his fruit and my fruit. There is no difference or no differentiation. Oh, death? No, you shall not surely die. There is no difference between life and death. He's breaking down the borders, the differences, the opposites, the rules. And then he said in verse 5, for God doth know. What he's saying to Eve is, I know what God knows. There's no difference between God and me. I'm not telling you lies. I know what God knows. And then he said, well, if you eat of my tree, come away from God, eat of my tree, and you shall be as God, still be as God. In fact, you will come into that consciousness that you are still God. And then he said, knowing good and evil. Now, it does not mean that you come over to my side or on the serpent's side and you differentiate between good and evil. No, no, no. You come over to my side and we do not differentiate between good and evil. So that's the whole picture. Non-dualism from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the East ignores this fall. In fact, makes use of the serpent's lies for their purposes. Now, you will understand this. After the fall, God made the point that man must not be immortal. Now, in Genesis 3:22, we read this. Lest man, he, put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims with a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life away from Adam and Eve. So man is not immortal. But when do we get that back? At the resurrection, right? We do not become immortal once we die, but we come back to life at the resurrection. Now, we get back to this immortality lie. In the middle is the icon Om, which means God and man are one, from eternity past to eternity future. And that was that lie in the garden by the serpent in Eden. And because of that immortal lie, immortal soul lie, the inner divinity lie, it has spawned all kinds of religion, as you can see in this chart. Reincarnation, awaken the God within, and so forth, and so forth. And it is in every Eastern religion, and it has crept into Christianity. Now, I want to show you something. An interview by a Catholic monk, Brother Lawrence, I think. Now, the background to this story is, in that picture here in the screen is my late Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. After 2008 financial crisis, and after he suffered a mild stroke and his wife had passed away, because of the financial crisis, he was worried he couldn't sleep, so he took up meditation with Brother Lawrence. And when Brother Lawrence met him for the first time, seeing that he is Chinese, but speaking English, he offered Mr. Lee 2 mantras, Maranatha, which is English, or Amitabha, or Ome Tofut in my local language. And Mr. Lee says, no, I'll pick Maranatha because I'm English educated and it fits my English tongue. But the point I'm trying to make is this: it doesn't matter what you use as a mantra. Picking Maranatha doesn't make you a Christian. Picking Ame Tofut doesn't make you a Buddhist. It's the repetitive activity of the mantra and what it does to your brain and what it does to your mind. Now, Mr. Lee doesn't believe in God. He's made that very clear all his life. And so the question was raised to Mr. Lee. After 3 years of meditation, has meditation given you a sense of what the spiritual values of life mean? And Mr. Lee's answer was, it makes him realize that there is an inner self. Now, Mr. Lee, not being a Christian or a believer in God, he said, inner self. In other words, after 3 years of meditation, of course, you discover something deeper, inner. But Brother Lawrence said, and you wouldn't call that a spiritual discovery? And then he added, or a spiritual discovery not religious. The suggestion is this: Mr. Lee, you don't need to be a Christian, a Hindu, or a Buddhist. You don't need to be of any religion. What you discover, your inner self, is spiritual. In other words, everyone has an inner spiritual divinity, irrespective of who you may be. Now, if we take this to heart and actually believe in this, the result will be that all religion will be obsoleted and all religion will be in harmony, will be united as one. Now, the Bible condemns non-dualism. Right? For example, it says, do not take light for darkness and darkness for light. Of Laodicea, the last church, it says, neither hot nor cold, you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. And in relation to apostate Israel, Satan did not say, worship me only. He said, worship God, yes, but also worship me. Non-dual. Now, Elijah had to come and force a choice. Now, non-dualism changes the personality of God. Malachi 2:17. Ye have wearied the Lord with your words, yet you say, wherein have we wearied him? When ye say, everyone that doeth evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and he delighteth in them. Or where is the God of judgment? Now, what it says is this: do not think that God delighteth in everyone that does evil. And that God does not differentiate. If he does that, if he does not differentiate, then where is the God of judgment? God is not a God of judgment. And God, the assertion is, God is a God of judgment. Zephaniah to Jerusalem and Judah. Zephaniah 1:7. Hold thy peace at the presence of the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is at hand. And 5 verses later, and it shall come to pass at that time that I will search Jerusalem with candles and punish the men that are settled on their lease. They're so settled in their minds that say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will he do evil. God will punish those who think of him as non-dual. So we get back to this chart, which started the talk. Hinduism dominates Eastern culture. From it came Buddhism, Taoism, and so forth. Om means God and man are one, irrespective of who that man may be. Now, I want to summarize here, all right? And we've gone through this. I want to emphasize that samadhi on the left and Christian teachings and Christian meditation on the right. Both are limbs and not steps. And here I want to summarize in a few points. Number 1, meditation is not just passive. It is also active. All right. So, right, what you're doing in your yoga studios are active meditation. Number 2, the 8 limbs are collectively consolidated as samadhi. It's a consolidation of what you are doing physically as well. Number 3, meditation manipulates the brain and mind and serves to further consolidate the limbs through altered brain phenomena. Very, very tricky. It occurs, the alteration occurs without you knowing. Number 4, like the tree of knowledge of good and evil, postural yoga is the sweet, seductive front end of a lethal anti-Christic system. Number 5, non-dual destroys all moral differentiation into a borderless, all is God, and God in all spiritual oneness. Number 6, when this happens, when all is God or God in all, when spiritual polar opposites are perceived as one, then there's no absolute truth. And God is not absolutely good, because good and evil are one, heaven and hell is one, God and Satan is one, and so forth, and so forth. Now, I probably will end here. Yes, I think so. My time is up. Thank you very much. See you later.